Thank you for listening to Interview Radio. I'm your host, Miss Gail. You're tuned in to WDRB Media, the voice of the community, the only station giving you double the information and inspiration. Again, if you're listening to our Heart Intune radio app, again, welcome. Today's show, I have a special guest that is dear to my heart, Miss Joyce Cooper. I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and tell you what she's been up to. But first, the sponsor for today's show is Mary Kay Cosmetic, partner with Cheryl Williams. Mary Kay Cosmetic, changing women's lives. And also Pasta Rasta Accessory, changing women's lives $5 at a time. If you want to know more about these products, you can contact me at InnerBeautyMK.com or on Facebook, Inner Beauty Radio, and also Facebook, MZGAIL, that's MKGAIL, and also on Twitter, Miss Gail 2, that's MZGAILTOO. And here is Miss Cooper.
Hello, Gail. My name is Joyce Cooper. I am a retired educator. I am also an author. I have just released my first fiction book, High School Stories, Life Interrupted. My nonfiction book was released last year, and it is entitled Enlightened Teaching, Elevating Through Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs.
Thank you for joining us, Ms. Cooper. I want to call her something else because, like I said, she is dear to my heart. I've been knowing her practically all my life. We're classmates, we're friends. She is awesome. We're going to talk about her new book that's a high school story, Life Interrupted. It deals with more about mental health issues and different things that our high school and kids really go through. And I was asking her a question about what has changed since we was in high school. So I'm just going to let her talk and have her way and tell you about that or what's going on that we need to know that can bring out our inner beauty. And also things we need to know that has been hindering our inner beauty, especially for our high school kids.
Thank you, Gail. When I wrote Enlightened Teaching, Elevating Through Maslow's Hierarchy of Needs, I included in that 4 noble truths when it comes to children. And one of them is that everybody is created in the image of the Creator. And that's something that we have forgotten. I honestly think that has a lot to do with why children suffer from mental health issues. When I was in the classroom, we would have a daily routine that included mindfulness. And one of the things we said were daily affirmations. Affirmation number 1 was, I am loved, lovable, loving. And the funny thing about it is when my students were misbehaving, their peers would say, well, Miss Cooper, so-and-so is not being loving in their words, or so-and-so is not being loving in what they are saying or what they are doing. Inner beauty, when we remember that we are created in the image of the Creator, we are all representations of God, whoever your God may be, whoever you may identify with. We're all an example of that Creator. So children have forgotten that. There are a number of children who have turned away from religion. I can understand why they've turned away from religion based on the stories that they've told me. But what I've tried to get them to understand is let's put aside religion and let's talk about spirituality. So that's one of the things that has changed, is that children don't have the identity and the connection with a higher being or a higher power that would help them understand that we all have to remember that we don't need to trespass against anybody. And at the same time, we don't need anybody trespassing against us. So it's a twofold thing. Like when you say the Lord's Prayer, and I know this may not be what you asked me. However, when I taught my Sunday school classes or vacation Bible school classes, and we said the Lord's Prayer, I said, listen, forgive those who trespass against us, and our trespasses are forgiven as well. Well, what we have to understand is that lives get interrupted. Mental health is affected because people are trespassing, and the trespasses continue, and then we get into that cycle because we think that's how it's supposed to be. And so a perpetual cycle, or if you are somebody who's in psychology or in education, it's called complex traumas and generational traumas. And I think that's what has happened because our children are a little bit more conscious as far as understanding how people are feeling, and that's why there are interruptions because they don't know how to handle those things.
Okay, well, with that being said, does that have a lot to do with, because, when we was coming up, we always say, if somebody hits you, you hit them back. And we all know that hurt people hurt people. So, and also, nowadays I noticed that it's not a lot of fighting, but it's more violence. I mean, when we was in the playground, and like I say, when we was taught, if somebody hit you, hit them back. Well, somebody talk about my mom, mama talk about their mom, and the cycle goes on. But it's like it's going to the extreme. It's not pass a lick here, pass a lick there. Now it's picking up guns. Mm-hmm. It's taking your life. Mm-hmm. And now it seems like children are taking it more personal. Mm-hmm. You said that you're lovable, mm-hmm. and you're loving. Mm-hmm. But when the bully comes and they tell you, you ugly, mm-hmm. your mama can't afford these nice clothes, mm-hmm. you ain't, yes, I'm saying ain't Interview, mm-hmm. you ain't got the newest Jordans or the latest style. Mm-hmm. How is that different from now than it was then?
You still have some of that going on. However, those are just the icing on a cake. It's not the ingredients in the cake. It's not even the ingredients in the icing. And I think that's one thing that has created a divide in an identity with the Creator, because parents let you know when we were growing up who you belong to. A lot of times our students don't get that anymore. My parents were divorced when I was growing up. My dad's family was in our lives, and I did not realize and appreciate what they gave to us until I became a teacher. They gave us an identity, and they gave us a strong identity. They told us about our roots. They made sure we understood that. Students don't have that anymore, because if your father is incarcerated and you're not in contact with their family, his family, then you've lost a piece of who you are. If your mom isn't around, you've lost a piece of who you are. And so we've got to get back to, number one, the inner beauty. When we get them to understand that you are created in love. A lot of times kids think if my parent isn't there, then they hated me. And I let them know that when the Big Bang happened, somebody was loving somebody. Mm-hmm. And life happens after that. Once students understand that, believe it or not, it is a healing for them. And speaking as a teacher now, they get their schoolwork done a whole lot easier when they understand that the struggle of them doing their work, once we got through that, you don't have it anymore.
Wow, that is, you are so correct. Because I remember we was made to go to church. We let us know, okay, you, like, for instance, you're this, you belong to this family. This is your family. This is your cousin. You don't fight your cousin. You don't put your family down. You uplift each other. You treat your neighbor. That's your neighbor. Because where I grew up, in my grandma's house, everybody in the neighborhood was like family, and everybody cared. They looked out. In this day and time, it seemed like children are more isolated. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have my granddaughter. She's only 5. I have to take the game and the phones and stuff away because, okay, interact with us. Come give G-Ma a hug. Come, G-Ma, I have to say G-Ma love that baby, and we need that. I know children need that these days, know that they are loved, because I know what it's like to have low self-esteem. I know what it's like to feel like don't nobody care. But just when you think nobody care, God care, and like you say, the affirmation is so important. But sometimes we forget ourselves because of life. So what would you have to say, how can we as a community encourage children or do more? Because we all can do better.
Well, one of the things we need to do is we need to let them have an identity. We need to help them develop and establish an identity. Schools are there to educate people. That's their job. However, academics is not everybody's strong point. And I would always tell parents at the beginning of school, this is what my job is. My job is to teach your kid. Your job is to help your kid figure out who God created him or her to be. Now, that was part of my job, and I would say to my students, okay, I'm doing the very best I can. So I struggle with giving grades, because how can I grade somebody on something that they weren't created to be? So I didn't have a lot of grades, and a lot of times I curbed grades, or I wouldn't give papers back if the grades were so low, to be honest, because there again, I'm killing who God created them to be before they have a chance to even explore who God created them to be. And that's difficult when you transform into being more of a spiritual being and being able to recognize the God essence in everything and everybody. So we have to help them identify who God created them to be. For example, and I laugh about this all the time, about maybe 7 years ago, my daughter was trying to teach my son how to draw, and art is not his thing. And she looked at me and she said, Mama, I cannot help him. Art is not his thing. And I said to him, that's okay. Art is not your thing. So when he went to school a couple of years later, when he was in school, he was about in like 4th grade. He didn't want to go to school. And I'm like, why don't you want to go to school? You love school. Well, he said, my art teacher takes my art and she throws it away. So he started not wanting to go to school on the day there's art. And I reminded him, I said, look, art is not your thing. Art is your sister's thing. You are athletic. So you go into your art class, you do the very best that you can. And then if your teacher gets upset, she'll have to deal with it, because you're not an artist. But see, she had taught his sister and she was comparing them. But God didn't create him to be an artist. Just like when he went to 6th grade, he thought he wanted to be in band. He tried saxophone. After about a month, he looked at me and he said, Mama, band is not my thing. I said, okay, we'll see if you can get out at the end of the semester, but you have to stay in here for the semester. He said it's not his thing. So there's nothing wrong with band not being his thing. There's nothing wrong with music not being his thing. What is right is that he identifies what his thing is. And his thing is sports, whether it's analyzing sports or playing sports, that's his thing.
Okay. Well, Ms. Cooper, I have really enjoyed you, but this is the end of this segment, and we will continue the segment on next week. We will. You can also be on the lookout for her new book, High School Stories: Life Interrupted. You can find that information on Interveiw Radio and Facebook, also interviewtomk.com, and also Ms. Cooper is going to give you her information as well.
Yes, I'm on Facebook. If you type in High School Stories, you will find my Facebook page for High School Stories.
Thank you. And we'll be back on next week to continue our discussion on High School Stories Interrupted. And remember, till then, we all have inner beauty.